I think that is so crucial for any founder's journey, is when you start to shake off the imposter syndrome. And you have these, I think it's like a staircase. You have these little steps of like, well, I'm not really a founder until we've raised money. I'm not really a founder until we have like someone in the industry vouch for us. I'm not really a founder until we have revenue. Right. And I'm sure that's the case when you're 10 years into, right?
Yeah.
Where you, it's all relative. But now, like, no one could ever tell me that I'm not a founder, right? That imposter syndrome is gone.
So you went to the most famous high school, I'd say, in the entire world. For those who don't know, Kobe Bryant went to Lower Merion. You've probably seen the jersey with Bryant on it and weren't sure where it came from, but would love to pick your brain on your Lower Merion experience.
Yeah, totally. I mean, Lower Merion, like Kobe Bryant was such a big part of growing up. I would say inspiration definitely is probably the right word. I mean, I saw him every day growing up, right? Our gym, he paid for our gym. He'd come back and visit with the basketball team and give them gear. I'm not even going to take clout. I was not on the basketball team as much as I wish I was. We won state championships and had a couple NBA players graduate. So I was not good enough as just a regular basketball player, but I always wanted to. But anyways, yeah, Kobe would come back and like, he was a huge part of, I think, our school's culture. And if I can look back from, I guess, already like 10 years ago or more in high school, the biggest thing about Kobe is that he was a hard worker. And of course, he had natural talent, but he was not the most naturally gifted. But he worked so hard. Like he was there. His high school basketball coach is the same coach that we had as well. He stayed through. His name is Coach Greg Downer. And the biggest thing he would always say is that Kobe was in the gym before school, during practice, and after practice, or before school, right after school, and then after practice ended, right? And so that was a huge thing where you just have this inspiration of like, oh, you could write it off as talent, but in reality, there's also so much hard work that goes into it.
Now, maybe keeping the thread of the Mamba mentality going, I know you played football growing up, and the spirit of this podcast, Reason for Everything, I've talked to a bunch of people on the other side of the camera or other side of the table who've had life circumstances happen to them, whether it was an injury, getting fired from their job, a breakup, a move, things that impacted their life trajectory that ended up being a blessing in disguise. And I know that was a similar case for you with your football injury. So I'd love to have you share a little bit more about that and kind of how that set you on the track for collegiate athletics.
Yeah, totally. So I loved football growing up. Like you mentioned, that's what I played. I was convinced for a bit that I was going to make it to the NFL. Still part of me feels like I could, but maybe a little too old now. But for me, so what happened was I have a couple screws here in my hand. My sophomore year, I tore every single ligament in here and here. And then this bone was completely shattered, which ended my sophomore season of football. And when you have an injury like that, you start to think about how that, if you had another one, and how that could change, the future of your life. You think it's going to be one way. You're relying on your body to get you there. Inevitably, what that brought me to was rowing, which is very atypical. There aren't a lot of football players who are also rowers. But I decided in that moment, like, I always knew I needed to use athletics to get into college and to take me to the level of institution that I hope to study at. And a big thing in that moment was I could take a risk. I was good at football. I definitely was getting recruited and end up still getting recruited in college for football, but it was very rocky. And I also, in that moment when I had that injury and had only 2 seasons left to get recruited and to have that bring me to that collegiate level, I made the decision that I was going to take rowing more seriously, keep my grades, start taking my grades a little bit more seriously. And that, I think, is like a reason for everything. Like that injury that I ended up playing through and had to end up getting surgery because my hand would have been like, this finger would have been forever when I made a fist, like facing outwards. And so that there's all of these things where it seems like such a minor injury. It was a catalyst, I think, for the eventual route that took me to row throughout high school, get recruited, row throughout college, and the types of people that I met through that sport, but also through the institution it took me, which was at Hamilton College, small liberal arts. I don't know if I would have landed in a place like that had it not been for this injury.
Now let's talk about that recruitment process, because I think most people know how that high school uh, college application process goes, applying, start a senior year, blasting out a bunch of applications, seeing what lands. But for athletes, it's a much more expedited process. You usually have an idea where you're going to go sophomore, junior, senior year, and it's probably even more sped up since you and I were in high school. But what was that process like for you actually landing on Hamilton? I assume it was a little bit atypical.
Yeah, it was definitely atypical. I knew where I was going before senior year started. I never had that typical. I applied to 25 schools and like I have 10 safeties, 5 reaches, and 10 like where I think I'm at. For me, it's also very interesting with timed sports, meaning like rowing, running, anything where you submit a time and it can be proven. I would, to go to college, instead of like being nervous about filling out an application, I would go on the websites of the colleges I wanted to go to, and I would just type in what my time was for like a specific distance, and then I'd get an email or not get an email if I was invited to a visit. It was very it was very strange in the sense that it was anticlimactic, and then you get the email and it's like I probably did overnight visits for, I don't know, 10 places or so. And it was very funny to just get an email saying you're invited based on 3 digits of how fast you were. And of course, to actually then get in, you still have to apply. But
Right.
once you're invited, it's a pretty good sign that you can get in.
Now, sophomore year, this injury happens in football. You pivot to rowing, which was a impactful part of your journey, which we can get into here in a second. But before that, did you have any? I know your eyes were set on going to the league for football. Did you have any line of sight into any part of an entrepreneurial bug in you that's now being fulfilled with grit, or was that R4E moment, if you will, the kind of first sense of, hey, I'm not going to be a pro football player. There's no professional rowing career that I can go and pursue. I want to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think it's funny because at the time you don't know what you don't know. Like even being 14, 15, thinking like maybe I could go to the league was ridiculous. Just given the program that I was at and what our team looked like and my skill level and size. But I think having a big dream like that allows you to then think outside the box of what's right for you or what's possible for your like ability level. And so at that time, when I was a teenager, I started working in sort of a chief of staff capacity for a founder in my community. And that opened my eyes to an atypical career path. And I think there's a big correlation between wanting sports to drive who you are versus academics, and then also an entrepreneurial route, right? Where you think of what do most people do? And then what is like the road less traveled, and the road less traveled always interested me, whether it was entrepreneurship or athletics.
How did that translate into your schooling, right? Like, were you the type of kid that, like, maybe Kobe was getting into the gym early to put shots up? Were you, an A student growing up, or was it, even in the pivot to rowing, were you, still completely athletics focused? What was your mindset like getting ready to, get into the world of rowing?
Yeah, I was a bad kid, I would say. Definitely. I was I have been to my local police station more times than I'd like to admit when I was a teenager. And every year I like to tell this story from sixth or seventh grade until I graduated high school. I both my parents and every teacher and the principal, we had to always have like a team meeting, which was all of the teachers and myself about my behavior. But what was interesting is starting in 10th grade, my grades really turned around, and it was pretty much a straight A student. We did AP and honors. I think I always knew that I was intelligent, or I felt intelligent. Maybe I was just arrogant. I don't know. But if I tried, I felt I was able to achieve it. So it was interesting going through this maturation process of still misbehaving and, acting out in class, whatever you want to call it, but then feeling even more confident because I'm like, well, I can get all A's on your tests and I can still, goof around.
Yeah.
And so I was in that shift. I think that injury really did a lot for me, right? It showed that your life can change in a moment, and that you have to be an owner of your life, whether it's grades, athletics, relationships, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Now, going to Hamilton, not pursuing a sport where there was a professional outlet at the end of it. And I talk to my student athlete friends about this a lot. Like, what's mindset like going to there? Because obviously, you're going, trying to compete. You're a competitive individual trying to win regattas and whatnot in the rowing space. But it almost seems a little zero sum because maybe you can go to the Olympics, but what's that like being a student athlete in a sport that's not football, not basketball, and even, soccer, if you're not, top 0.001%, you're not going to any sort of like major next step. So how did you juxtapose being a student athlete, but also that kind of zero sum feeling of, hey, I know this is only for 4 years and need to find a job afterwards?
Yeah, I think in some ways rowing made it easier because I knew I was not good enough to be an Olympian or anything even close. So from sophomore year, when I started to really take it seriously, or even freshman year of high school, when I knew this is a means to an end. That means will be getting me into college. And then I started to love a lot of aspects of the sport and made really close friends. And we'll get into this, but my now co-founder and best friend from growing up, we met on the team in high school. And I think so to answer the question, rowing made it easier, right? Because even if you are a professional, you're not making that much money off of it. And then the mindset in college, part of it is just momentum. Like, you're here, you got recruited, like, let's keep it up. And part of it's probably also 30% like just love of, I like competing. Like, athletics for most people are irrational if you think about it, right? There's no gain outside of it, just is. You just enjoy doing the thing. You enjoy practicing, X number of hours a week to play a game for, at most 2 to 3 hours that week. There's the camaraderie aspect to it as well, of course. Like, there's that community that you find. So I think it's all of those things wrapped into one, right? Like, loving the people who do it, like loving to challenge yourself, and then also being in good shape feels great. Like, there's also just that, and it almost does it for you, because as a coach, like, you got to do this today, and I'm like, okay. Whereas since I've graduated, there's no way I can say that I've been as disciplined in that regard.
Yeah. It might be the, primal instinct in us that just has the urge to run around, lift heavy things, move our bodies. But even like on Monday, I had an intramural basketball game. Tuesday morning, I woke up, I told my fiance, I'm like, we need to get a cold plunge for the balcony because I'm sore. And she reminded me that I'm an intramural basketball player, not an NBA athlete, which was humbling and the honesty I needed. But we got cooked. We got absolutely cooked. Yeah, no, don't have the sauce that other team had. But nonetheless, so you go to Hamilton. You're on the crew team. Obviously, going to a good liberal arts school like that's probably a pipeline to a big consulting firm, investment banking, or a good landing spot after your 4 years of undergrad. What was your headspace like from a recruitment perspective? You had an unorthodox recruiting process from high school to college. How about from college to the real world?
Yeah, I think about this a lot, actually. So growing up, I thought there were two professions that could make you rich. And ironically, I didn't know anyone who was rich from doing these two professions, maybe one or two people, but it was, you're a doctor or you're a lawyer. And
Right.
I had sworn both of those off at that point. So I was coming into college like, how do people make money? And Hamilton opened my eyes to a level of wealth that I had never seen before. Most kids, or at least I think most kids, were from private schools, boarding schools, just the types of people I had never been around, having gone to public school my entire life, and everyone I knew went to public school as well. Just regular people, right? So I think a big part of that journey, especially in the first 2 years, was just learning that there were more opportunities outside of being a doctor or a lawyer, or maybe like an accountant. But accountants weren't rich either, right? I still don't think they are. So I was like, how are there people with that house, right? Like, I'd see them, but I grew up in an apartment, and I'm like, how did like, where's the disconnect? What am I missing here? And so for me, I think when I think about my Hamilton experience, like what going to a school like that taught me was how you can figure out to get to how do you get to that next level? Like, how do you go from you get a job, you graduate, you save your money, and then you retire at 62 to you can make generational wealth if you work hard in your 40-year career. And like, what does that work actually look like? So to answer the question, like it went from just saying like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed to in the first 2 years to then switching to a very serious, like I need to figure out what I don't know that I don't know.
Yeah. Now, what did you end up landing on? Because there's a bunch of different paths that you could end up landing into, which will get you to that aspect of generational wealth you were alluding to. But what was the career path you decided choosing?
Yeah, so I ended up, this is good for reason for everything. So I thought investment bank. I learned about investment banking. Still didn't really know what it was, but I had a couple of interviews, and in those interviews, it was clear that I didn't know what it was, which is why I didn't end up getting one of those jobs. I did intern my sophomore year at an investment bank and learned quickly that I didn't again understand what it was and like how I would get the skill set from getting an econ degree to becoming like a full scale like financier. And then what that going to college in COVID got a couple of my internship offers in finance rescinded, which then brought me to startups. And that was, I think, definitely a blessing, and really got me to on the path that I'm on today.
Gotcha. And now I'd be curious. I know part of that journey was going through the Canon project. For people that don't know, could you give a quick blurb on that group? Because I think what they've done is unbelievable.
Yeah. So you kind of alluded to this earlier that from those types of schools, especially athletes end up in banking and consulting and those types of routes. So what the Canon Project does, run by Ian Feeney, who's a great entrepreneur, is they place talent that goes the consulting and investment banking route into startups earlier in their career instead of because so many people burn out from banking and from consulting and end up going in-house at one of these, high growth startups anyways. So what Ian and his firm now does is say, hey, you're going to be competitive. You should go ahead and go into one of these sales roles at one of these companies, and you can increase that sort of your trajectory earlier than if you were to do something for a bit and then go and land in that same job.
I want to pull on that thread a little further, but before we do, and I know we've talked about this in the past, but I'd be curious your takes on the future of higher ed. And obviously, neither of us are experts, but I think in a world where kids can make so much money online, whether it's just by posting content regularly or making an e-com site or drop shipping stuff, I have this thesis that our kids and our kids' generation might not be going to the typical 4-year institution, maybe outside of for social reasons, the way that we did. I'd be curious your take on it because I feel like, and I know that a lot of the coursework that I took, a lot of that information, most of that information is available right now on YouTube. You could go onto your LLM of choice and find any of the answers that you're looking for. So curious your take on the future of higher ed.
Yeah. This is cliche for liberal arts kids, but I think I am a strong believer in a liberal arts education and how to think and to understand concepts versus the information, right? And now more than ever, like it's almost unbelievable to have an example like ChatGPT to say like, there is no need for me to ever memorize anything again, which I don't think is true. I still think it's important to, digest knowledge and think about it. But for the case of, people who are younger, and I always thought it was ridiculous that you memorize something, regurgitate it, and forget it, right? It's something I'm good at doing, actually, but I thought it was silly. And I've always felt that, probably why I got in trouble a lot, right? Speaking out, this is stupid. I'm going to forget it anyways, but I'm going to get a 95 on your test. So anyways, understanding how the world works, how to think about systems, I think is super important. So for myself, I was an econ major and I loved econ, especially the way they taught it at Hamilton, which was I wrote far more papers about economics than I ever did problem sets or equations or like the deep level math that applied economics degrees that big universities tend to teach. right? Like really, I had to be face up with, well, if this firm has this competitive advantage, what would that actually mean for this firm in the market? And like all of those, the actual concepts and really thinking about it, I mean, it's a no-brainer that that is a massive help in my entrepreneurial journey today.
Yeah. Now, how did that impact you for your first role? Because you ended up at Silo. You were the youngest person working there, still in the early days of the company, helped them raise multiple rounds, and then ended up leaving. But what was that journey like for you starting fresh out of school at a startup? Probably, like I said, the youngest person there. How was that journey for you? What was that? A lot of people, like you said, with Canon Project, they say, I need to go work in consulting for 2 years, cut my teeth a bit, learn how to, be a business strategist, and then go to a startup. You went straight from education to a startup. Like what was the Jarod value prop at 22 that the company was gung ho about to say, hey, come on board, let's go do this thing?
Yeah, totally. And I guess to speak a little bit about the transition just before getting into that from investment banking to startups, is for me, what I thought was interesting in finance was not banking, was not private equity, but was venture capital. Because having worked at these startups in high school and college, like I mentioned, I thought it was cool to be on the investment side. At least in college, I thought that. I think I probably glorified the money more than like the actual job itself, because now having built and being on the builder side, I don't want to be an investor, at least for a very long time. But at the time I thought, okay, how do you get into venture capital? There are two ways. You become a banker and then eventually you go to the VC side, or you work at startups and then you go to the VC side. And that is, fast forward, inevitably what I did, which we can
Right.
get to. But my value prop at 22 is in these startups that I had worked at through high school and college. I was also serving as like an early account executive, effectively. So I had that sales job and that sales experience, and also I was tenacious and didn't fear anything. Like I didn't care picking up the phone, everyone telling me no. It just didn't bother me, right? Like I think part of that is being an athlete. Part of that is me being like confident, and a skill of mine is not caring what people think. And so I think that was my value prop, was like, I'll just hit the phones 100 times a day and send as many emails as you want. And in that process, learn how a business is built.
And then you ended up going in, obviously executing on what you just outlined. Got, fastest promotion ever at the company. What was that journey like for you, going from, a pretty nimble startup when you started to a scaled quasi mature business in the, realm of venture? What was that experience like for you, going from, 0 to 1 there, 0.5 to 1?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it was so funny to feel like when I'm 22 and then I turned 23 while at this company, we had doubled or tripled in headcount while I was there, to feel like an elder of the business. And when I got promoted, I think it was a pretty big risk for both sides, right? I
Yeah.
ended up moving out to San Francisco and sort of spearheading that home territory of Silo, and getting the backyard of where the business was started, where the investors are, right? A16Z backed the company, and I'm there. Like, I'm going to get us, on the ground. I'm going to be the go-to-market guy. And I am proud to say I enjoyed it and did a good job. But I think it was a risk. And I think what that experience showed me personally is that you can do anything you set your mind to. But also, companies are just built by people who do things and care, right? Like there's no secret to it aside from a really good group of people who want to succeed together. And like that to me is like one of the biggest, if not the biggest, part of the journey so far.
Now, were you living in New York at the start and then moved to SF? Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. The promotion brought me out to SF.
Yeah. What was that like? Because, especially over the last couple of years, SF has been in the headlines, having its issues. Obviously now kind of on the on an upward trajectory with all of the capital being deployed there with the AI startups. But a couple of years ago, SF wasn't the, hottest place to be for young professionals. So what was that journey like for you? Was that a tough decision in your head I know you alluded to the risk that you were taking by getting the promotion as well as on the company side, but what was that journey like for you getting out to SF?
Yeah. I mean, not part of, but a big driver to move to SF was also as my co-founder and I started to ideate on companies that we wanted to build, which eventually became Grid. He was out in San Francisco as a software engineer, and it was very clear that let's be together in this time. I have this opportunity to move out there without dropping my entire career. Like it seems like the stars were aligned in that sense. But in terms of actually getting out there and my time there, I remember I moved out of my New York apartment, ended up subletting it to a friend. And I went home the weekend after before I was flying out to SF, and I cried in front of my entire family, and I couldn't stop because it was so, I don't know if scary was the word. It was just terrible. Like I loved my life in New York, young. I was, like I said, 23 in the city, having a great time living with my best friend, who's still my closest friend, and was like going out and you make a life for yourself, especially feeling good about your career. And then to say, all right, time to prioritize my career and work and an eventual dream of starting a company was a very scary thing. And it was it was really, that was one of the toughest moments of my life.
It's all the cliches of fortune favors the bold, all of that, but like I feel like at that stage it was probably the, hey, I'm no longer a 22-year-old kid anymore that can go out a couple nights a week with my friends. It's time to focus on my career, which is, I feel like most people have it somewhere between 22 to 28. I feel like folks in banking or consulting might have it a little sooner than folks in other roles, but maybe it hits you a little sooner. That wake up call is, hey, I'm actually someone that has to pay bills and focus on my career and not just focus on friendships and enhancing my quality of life in the city that I'm used to. And in that, you go to SF, you mentioned the early kind of inklings of starting a company with your buddy Kevin. At that time, were you starting to mechanically adjust how you were living life with the idea of, hey, I'm going to be starting a business one day? I know being, you're in a startup, it's capital intensive. Did your lifestyle change at all with the idea that a startup was coming in your head?
Definitely. I would say like having to save money was a big thing. Always keeping it in mind that, every dollar you spend now, you might want to have that saved up because, when you start a company, you don't know where your income is going to come from. Especially at that time, I didn't know. I still think this is funny. So many people who haven't started companies yet don't know where their salary comes from in a venture-backed company. And it
Right.
comes from the capital that you've raised. And at the time, I was like, how does it work, right? And so mechanically, yeah, it does change in that way where it's like every dollar, eventually knowing I wanted to start a venture-backed company, that was going to be the future. But on a positive note, what did also change for me was that my day job never felt like the end all be all. I felt like I had this tether out of the matrix at any time that I wanted to take it because I'm dead set that this is going to be the right decision for me and that we're on to something. And even getting a little ahead of myself, but even if we are not onto something and we're not the biggest, the next big company, it is still a great way to get out of the matrix and to prove to yourself that you're doing something right.
Maybe taking a step back, if you could go back to 23-year-old Jarod sitting down and ideating on what an idea might be to be your eventual startup, what does that tether look like? Is it just, hey, I can quit my job and figure it out? Is it like, hey, I can move back to Philly and make ends meet there? Like, how are you thinking about that tether in that time? Was it like purely just the 23-year-old invincible belief that you had at the time?
I think it was, in major part, if not 100%, was when I knew that my co-founder Kevin was in and that we were going to do it together. I felt like unstoppable because Kevin had pushed me in so many ways and is such a powerful individual. And I had seen how hard he works and how intense he is in our rowing careers together when we were younger, that having a partner like that, I'm like, at the end of the day, like, I don't know how you can stop us together.
Right.
And also having someone who you've seen is so dedicated to the things they care about along your side, even if everything crashes and burns, it just doesn't matter because you're going to figure it out like we had for 4 years, and then like we have been now for the last several years.
You're throwing paint against the wall with Kevin, still at Silo, trying to figure it out what this idea was going to be. At what point did, some formation start to come together with that paint on the wall to think, hey, like this might be Grid? Was that while you were, hanging out in San Francisco between work, or when did that first kind of inkling idea of Grid come to be?
Yeah, so we first had the idea. This is one of these, like, I almost don't want to admit it because it's like a market timing fit thing, but it's the truth. For us, it started in college when I was writing my thesis. I was an avid Tinder user. Do with that what you will, but I was. And I was writing my thesis my senior spring, and I got up to take a break, and I walk over to the window, just like look around, and on the corner of that street was my favorite bar restaurant. I look down at my hand, my phone is in my hand, and I'm aimlessly swiping on Tinder. And I'm like, first off, red flag. I'm not even paying attention. That means I'm not going to go on a date or meet up with any of these girls, right? That was the first thing. Like, this is probably not a great product if that's the case.
Right.
No offense to our Tinder supporters and friends, but at that time, I felt like, what's going on here? And I made the connection. If I knew one of these girls that I had matched with wanted to go to that specific restaurant and bar, I felt like I would have de-risked my date, de-risked my night, because at the very least, I had a good meal, I had drinks that I like, I'm in a comfortable place. And there's also the biggest thing, and this is still really our ethos, is that where someone spends time says a lot about who they are, and you can forecast compatibility based on where someone chooses to spend time. And so that was the original moment, that light bulb, when that light bulb went off. But it took us a while to, we'd ebb and flow in terms of when is the right time. But that was the recognition of a market gap, I would say, was in that moment.
Yeah, you said the scene well. That'll be portrayed by DiCaprio or someone in the Grid movie one day, I'm sure.
One day.
One day. So, but Silo wasn't
More of a Channing Tatum is what I get.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Yeah. So, but Silo wasn't your last stop before going all in on Grid. You ended up getting recruited to First Round Capital as a go-to-market specialist. Talk to the audience about what that was like. Again, like you said, that was the dream. It was getting to VC land, being on the other side of the table, deploying capital, or positioning how that capital should be deployed. What was that recruitment process like for you? What was that journey like for you while at a venture fund?
Yeah, it was very strange because it was a dream come true, like you said, right? And it's funny. I remember getting recruited from the hiring manager. I accidentally erased the first email that she sent me, and thank God, and she's still there, excellent at her job, probably the best I've ever seen. Followed up, of course, and I wasn't the only person that they were trying to hire, obviously, for that role. But I saw the message and I'm like, oh, wow, this seems like an excellent opportunity. It's taking what you've done at these other startups and then really evangelizing that knowledge and getting deep with the entire portfolio, particularly with the most recent investments. And I loved that job, and it was perfect for once I got it. And I guess to rewind the recruitment process, I think I interviewed, which was partially by my own choice, but I interviewed in San Francisco, in New York, and in Philly, which are the three places they have offices in. I had double-digit interviews for sure, sometimes one-on-ones, sometimes team interviews, lunch with the entire SF team. And I think I wrote a 20-page assignment. It was close to, it was like 18 or 19 pages. I actually remember one of the partners, she said it was robust. It was our most robust entry, and didn't want to call it long because they did appreciate the care, but they said, this was, some people, it was only 2 questions too. It was literally 2 open-ended questions. And I'm like, I'm getting this job. I stayed up all night. I stayed up for 24 or 48 straight hours, just like blasted through this thing. Very intense. And, to speak to the quality of First Round, I mean, those people, everyone who works there, the partnership, all the founders are truly the smartest people I've ever met. The smartest, most capable, um, most high intensity. They truly define excellence. Like, I have that in my LinkedIn profile because it's true. That is a standard that I strive to operate at every single day, and admittedly fall short often, right? Like, they set the standard. They are who they are for a reason. And so shout out to everybody in that ecosystem. They're incredible. Um, but that to bring it back to sort of the grid journey, I felt like we might have been ready to start grid when I ended up going to First Round. But it was a tough choice to manage, like, to balance those two things. I think Kevin and I were pretty close to being ready, but not fully ready. And so I'm very thankful for that experience. And I think the timeline played out how it should, and reason for everything, right?
Yeah. Now, like we said, this is, getting to venture land is the dream for most people, right? You want to go sell your company, be a successful angel, start your own fund, or raise funds from LPs, or you want to go and get into banking, get into VC. Like, that is the top of the mountain for most people. But you're there already having your mindset on, hey, I want to be a founder one day, whether they knew it or not. How did you right size that in your head? Again, you're still, in your early 20s, you're working at the top of the mountain for what most people would dream to get. Like, did you ever have those senses of, like, the conversations in your head of, like, am I crazy? Am I, like, leaving this on the table to go and take a much riskier bet on myself, of course, but a risky bet nonetheless?
Yeah. I wish, it's funny, for the purpose of answering this question, I almost wish that I had that conversation in my head more. But I think whether it's because I'm bullheaded, problematically so, or whatever it is, like, it crossed through my head, but that, the plan was the plan, and we already had put in so much work part-time. Like, we knew that this is what we were doing, and the market it made more sense as time went on. And I think today it's even more of a relevant product that we've built and are continuing to build, right? Like, maybe if someone had come in built exactly what our product does and it was absolutely crushing it, maybe we would have said, all right, is it really the time? Did we miss our opportunity? But I think those two things, like having set your mind to something and then also feeling like the market was still so perfectly timed for what we're doing, those things really made it an easy decision. At least emotionally, it made it an easy decision. But there are always going to be those thoughts, and the way I would sort of combat those is, if you can do it when you're like, if I can do it in my early 20s, was able to achieve it, like working in the industry and at a firm that I had respected when I was 23 or 24, whatever it is, I can probably do it again later. So that's the
Right.
one thing, right? Like, I'm still myself, and I'm only going to get smarter and only going to become a better employee, I guess the word would be. Which I don't know if that's true, actually. But I have gotten smarter and understand company building much better now. So there's that part. But also, I remember at First Round, there was this study, and I think YC did a study similar, that says essentially they tracked founders who were unsuccessful in their startup journey over 2 years. So I assume that's measured by some sort of financial outcome or whatever, if their startup existed for longer than 10 years, something like that.
Right.
And statistically, those that stayed at their same jobs versus those that left and then got another job had higher titles after that journey than they did if they were to have stayed. So if you really take it from, like, an actual risk perspective, sure, you're foregoing 2 years of a steady, high-paying salary, but you're going to land at a higher level. So you're going to recoup some of those costs and the learning. I mean, I could talk about how much I've learned and still learn every single day in these last 2 years. It's truly incredible. And I think every person, if they think they can do it, should start a business simply because of how much you learn.
Now, was it January 23 or January 24 when the product launched?
So we got accepted into the App Store January 24. Right as in that moment, I remember I was laying in my bed with a couple of my friends. We were like playing video games in my room. And there wasn't a lot of space in my room, New York City apartment. And I get the App Store Connect, like your App Store has been connected. The next day, it was time to put in the 2 weeks, and we scheduled a launch for Valentine's Day of 2024, and that was the timeline.
Nice, poetic. And now all right. So you put your 2 weeks in some point in January, and you have, call it 2-3 weeks runway to say, hey, I'm going to launch this. This is before a lot of these launch videos got popular, before some of this performative content started going everywhere on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. What was that launch process like for you? Like, you're a go-to-market expert, and probably worth taking some time in a minute here to talk about go-to-market, which I know we've chopped up in the past, but what was that thought process like for you? Just spent the last year plus focused on go-to-market. How are you thinking about doing that for your own business now?
Yeah, it's in that moment, speaking to it specifically, like I didn't know what consumer go-to-market looked like. And so that was a new motion for me. But a big thing, and I still am a big sort of proponent of this, is like you build up a big wait list. And I think most people, agree that this is the way to do it. You build up hype. You build up this wait list. And for us, I knew that we were only launching neighborhood by neighborhood. So I felt lucky in that sense that it wasn't like a nationwide launch. Like if we don't nail it today, it's over. We only launched in the West Village and then slowly expanded neighborhood by neighborhood in New York. So that was a big thing. But really, yeah, getting the word out, making sure the brand was tight by the time that we had launched. A little bit of social media hype, but not as much as we have now today. Yeah, those are really the big things.
And talk to us about the grid product in February 2024. It's different than it is today. But what was the initial thesis? What was the initial product like?
Yeah, so the initial product, we only had a couple of venues. So the way the product works is it started as a dating app, and that's our primary product. But now we are shifting, or sort of expanding beyond that, which I can get into in a moment. But started pure play dating app. You create a profile, and then you select specific places. So at that point, it was only bars and restaurants that you like or want to go to. And then once you select those specific places, we show you other people who want to go on dates at those same places, and then try to facilitate the actual meeting of getting off the app and meeting in person. We then work with the businesses that are listed on our product to provide data insights and to try and get them more traffic, more visibility to these high intent potential patrons. We, at the time in February 2024, we were only live in, I want to say it's like 23 is the number that's coming to my head. 23 bars and restaurants in the West Village. We've more than 10x that now. At this point, we are live in 12 neighborhoods in New York City and are about to launch a much more inclusive, expanded AI native product that I'm very excited to get out there in the world soon in the next couple of weeks. But that is what it looked like. It was only live really in one neighborhood, and it was pure play dating.
Talk to me about the feeling. Like you launched this product, you had your wait list built up. What was that like for you and Kevin at the time when you were getting your first notifications in your admin dashboard or portal saying, there's been a match, there's been a meetup? Like, what was that like? What was that early? What were those early wins like for you?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't, we had very low usage really until we went viral in the summer of last year. And a little win here and there is definitely real, right? It goes from an idea to, wow, someone actually matched, to, oh, these people, based on their conversation history, actually went and met up. Like those are the early wins. But I will say, I think with consumer, it felt real very quickly that one win, unlike with B2B, doesn't actually mean anything. It means something, right? It's an anecdote. It is proof that your product worked on one scale, but to understand the level of usage that's necessary to be what I consider like a real product is 100x that, is 1,000x that, which thankfully last summer, as we started to grow, became the case. But in the early days, it was like, how are we going to get there? Marketing is a massive beast that I respect all marketers today that I might not have in the past. Being a salesperson, there's always that butting of heads, but my God, it's a very serious and very difficult career.
I couldn't agree more with respect to marketers, and my take is that that's going to be one of the marketing is going to be one of the few jobs that won't be displaced by AI, especially people that can, analyze and predict culture well. Because I just don't think you can put an algorithm behind that at all. But neither here nor there. So you guys have some success over the last summer in 24, and then at what point? And you guys had your monetization strategy kind of figured out with the B2B side, but at what point did you say, hey, we need to go raise outside capital? Again, you had that exposure working at First Round. You probably had a bunch of warm connections, both from your time at Silo as well as from First Round. But at what point did you guys say, hey, we need to go raise some money?
Yeah, I mean, and this is, I think, true of any first-time founder, first-time fundraising, did it all wrong. I mean, so wrong, like didn't run a process. I thought, hey, I launched a product, like I have a pretty good like resume, or I thought so. My co-founder is really smart and capable. Like I think we're good. Like obviously people are going to give us a lot of money. Why wouldn't they? Which
Right.
everyone, from what I understand, all my founder friends think as well. So I just started casually taking conversations. I thought, the first 30 people I talked to, they're probably all going to give me money because like I'm great, right? That is not the case. I learned over like 6 months that I did it all wrong. Let people know we were raising starting in February. Didn't end up closing a check until the 4th of July, actually. That's when our like institutional lead last year came in. Because also there's like the stale raise and all these things that I didn't know, even having worked in venture. I think what you don't realize is a lot of times you only see like the pretty side of it, right? You don't often, even as an investor, not that I was, but on the VC side, you only see like the post raise, and those are the founders that I was working with, and like everything is great. You have a new set of challenges, but from that perspective, you've overcome that hurdle.
Right.
So I think we knew we wanted to raise outside capital. Eventually, got it done, and then, but the way we did it was totally wrong.
And then you alluded to the fact that you guys are backed by some of the early folks at Tinder. I don't quite remember exactly who, but what was that? Was that extremely validating for you guys? Was that inevitable? What was that like for you?
Yeah. So one of the co-founders of Tinder is one of our investors, and we met him actually before, and he kind of started as an advisor while I was still at First Round, and we were getting, this idea off the ground. He was very helpful in that like -0 or -1 to 0 phase, and is still very helpful. But that was when we were so out of our depths, and didn't understand, anything really. And it was incredibly validating. And I think to this day, it's still validating, and he's an excellent resource in so many ways. And for me, it was like, okay, we're starting to become real. We're starting to become real. And I think that is so crucial for any founder's journey, is when you start to shake off the imposter syndrome. And you have these, I think it's like a staircase. You have these little steps of like, well, I'm not really a founder until we've raised money. I'm not really a founder until we have like someone in the industry vouch for us. I'm not really a founder until we have revenue. Right. And I'm sure that's the case when you're 10 years into, right?
Yeah.
Where you it's all relative. But now like no one could ever tell me that I'm not a founder, right? That imposter syndrome is gone.
Yeah. Now you guys have some early traction, get some initial VC backing, and then at what point did this kind of new era of Grid come about in your all's heads? And what was that journey like from you got to from 0 to 1 in relative terms, of course, but you get from 0 to 1. At what point did you say, hey, maybe we need to expand our horizons besides just dating?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is hearing it from our user base, right? Our users build our product, and I'm a staunch believer that that is how every product should be built. You build for your customers, should build for you. Your users should build for you. So that was one thing. We just heard, hey, I love this concept for dating, but I'm also lonely and want more friends. And we also heard a lot from our female users that that's the case. And there are some amazing founders that are building like techs just for females to meet and make friends, and I think it's amazing. But that's what we heard, is that like like people are lonely, people want more friends. And looking back on it over the last 2 years, having done some reflection, like I've always been very lucky to have a community and have friends, whether it was through athletics, through religion, through sports, or through academics. Like I've always had people that I could turn to because of these communities. And we've built a product that essentially creates communities over these third spaces. Why not expand that and serve everybody and all types of relationships instead of being prescriptive only for dating, right? We don't care what type of relationship comes out of these out of our product meetups and what we facilitate, but we are passionate about ending loneliness for sure.
Now you guys have this upcoming product launch that will be inclusive of this kind of broader matchmaking based on location. In this world of AI, you guys launched a year and a half after, or a year and some change after ChatGPT was first released. It's never been easier to spin up an app. I'm sure you feel the same way, which is you open up LinkedIn or TikTok or Instagram every day, and there's another quasi competitor out there. How are you and Kevin and the founding team at Grid thinking about competition? Obviously, there's the ethos of wanting to end this loneliness epidemic that our generation's facing, but how do you think about competition internally at Grid?
This is, I think, true of once you shake off that feeling of imposter syndrome, market tailwinds are not a bad thing. Like competition, competition goes from scary to like invigorating when you cross that bridge, right? Like for me, when I see another competitor, I don't really care how it could be the exact same thing. I'm like, there's room for more. This problem clearly is only getting worse, unfortunately, but one of us is going to figure it out. There's always M&A opportunities in the future, whether it's us or them. Like I genuinely care about what we're trying to solve or help solve. Like we're not going to solely solve it, but I see more of it. People are paying attention. That means dollars are going to follow. Like investment dollars are going to really see this as a problem. I think, what I'm really a strong believer in is that there's so much unnecessary medical costs associated with loneliness and with mental health problems. And we are thinking so much about how do we medicate against this? How do we create telehealth products, AI companions? Like those, you're too far gone at that point. Like I think we need to look to the root, and obviously I'm biased because that's what we are doing. But when I see competitors over here, I get excited. I don't get excited when I see competitors over here. Right. Like, so for me, the closer to Grid that they are, of course, it's scary to a degree, but it's also a good thing. It means people are paying attention and the market will address it.
Now, you're a forward-looking thinker, whether you want to admit it or not. The fact that you were thinking about Grid when you were two jobs before a founder, where do you see this company yourself in? I call it, Grid 2030, Jarod 2030.
2030. I mean, there's like the real answer, and then there's the answer that I'll probably post on LinkedIn, which is this one. I really do think we can be the future of social media. And I'll caveat that and say, I think whoever wins the space will be the future of social media. And we think of social media 20 years ago as a way two friends who met in person can stay in touch. That's incredible. We've lost that, right? Now it's not staying in touch. Our whole relationship is online. And where I think social media will revert back to, the pendulum will come back to the middle, that is building connections that are going to continue in real life. They're going to maybe start online and then blossom in real life, but there is going to be a true human piece of social media, like the social aspect of social media, which is pretty cliche now. And then like that is what I hope is true for Grid. I hope we are the winners and we're going to work very hard to be the winners. But if not, like that is what I think is inevitable, is that human aspect. Now, my personal answer is I have no idea, right? Anyone who says they know what's going to happen in 5 years when it comes to being a founder, you never know. Our users will tell us. You can ask them, what Grid's going to be in 5 years. They'll know better than me.
That's solid. Now, for those listening in New York that want to date on Grid or meet on Grid, what's that journey like for them today?
Yeah. So right now, our dating app product is still live and we still have active users on there. look up Grid Dating app in the App Store, in the Apple App Store, and it will come right up. You download it, create a profile, start matching with people who want to go and do the same things as you. We have our new product coming very, very soon. The process will look very similar. You'll create a profile, but there will be some really unique and interesting pieces of that to the flow. You can import Instagram Reels and use it as more of like a personal bookkeeping and sort of saving of spots that you want to try out. And then we will do the facilitation and connection for you.
Love it. Now, as it relates to expanding to other markets outside of New York, we started talking about go to market earlier. I would say it's the hottest job title right now from what companies are coming to Burnt requesting. How would you describe that? You've been in that role in Venture, and you're obviously in motion right now with Grid. How would you describe go to market today? I feel like it's commonly misconceived, and I don't think there's like a solid answer around it, but I'd be curious your opinion.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing between go to market and sales, or go to market and marketing, is go to market is all inclusive, and all it means is that you have a product, you work at a company, and you are in the go to market position. You guys created a product. You're going to figure out what's best to increase revenue through the customer and business relationship. So that sometimes that could mean we need to hire 10 marketers because our sales led motion is not working, or that could be we need 10 more AEs because people love when we knock on their door and our hit rate is 50%. They just need to learn about us, right? Product led growth. It's anything related to, we need to get out to market and figure out where our customers are and how we need to best get in front of them and then guide them through the purchasing process. So it's abstract, but it's also very clear. It's just, how do we increase revenue of this company, and who do we need to reach out to? Who do we need to hire in order to get that?
Now, maybe taking a big step back, what advice would you give to somebody that might be in their first role out of school, or they just started a new company or started at a new company, but they know that one day they want to be a founder entrepreneur? There's a lot of things you can do kind of in the background. We talked about this before, that -1 to 0 stage is, I would say, some of the most important to position yourselves properly for 0 to 1. What advice would you have for someone that's in that -1 to 0 stage right now, whether they're 5 years out or 5 days out from getting into that, 0 to 1 stage?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's so much that I think you should do. Like my first piece of advice, and this is just who I am, I always ask questions and try to talk to people who have done it, right? Like, start networking, and I don't like the word networking, but start learning from people who can tell you what is step 0, like how do you know what to do or where to go, any of that sort of stuff. So that's a big thing. Also start networking and getting to know people who not only have done it, but are quite impressive and carry weight in their careers, right? That personal referral stuff is very important. If nobody knows you, it's going to be very hard. Let's say you go out to raise money and no one knows you. It's going to be hard to get a reference check to go through and to get through that, right? You want to start building your network. I mean, your network is everything, good and bad, right? Don't try not to be too, I think, like too bullheaded until maybe you feel you're confident at a place where you can like go and make that start. But yeah, the biggest thing is learning from others and just making sure to lean on your network, exploring, learning. I mean, even the YC resources, startup school, like all that sort of stuff it's legit. It's, they really have done it. Venture funds put out good stuff. Other startups, I mean, I'm biased, but I think founders know best. If you have anyone who started a company in your network, sit down with them for an hour, ask for some of their time, and they'll tell you.
Come meet them on Burnt.
Yeah, meet them on Burnt. Exactly.
Let me ask you this, Jared, as we round out here. I feel like every founder, every entrepreneur has this dream of, whether it's organically, like there's a story of Will Ahmed from Whoop. They're in their final days of runway, and he's sitting down on his couch, deflated, not sure where the product was going to go, and he's watching his TV, and he sees LeBron in a Kia ad wearing a Whoop, and it was one of the 100 devices out there, and that was like the big aha moment for him. Now, in a similar vein, if you're sitting down one day, you're talking to somebody, or you hear that, or you're looking at your user data and you see some celebrities been using Grid, who would that person be as like the champion catalyst that you think would would just be a perfect, face of the franchise for you guys from a marketing perspective. $0 spent, just an organic user, and you can't say Shaq.
That's what was coming up. If it's not Shaq, because he's my unicorn. I love him, always have. Let's say like, ooh, that's a good question. Let me think. I gotta think on this. Ooh, that's a good question. It would probably be it might be Charles Barkley, honestly.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty close to them, but I'm trying to think like my Sixers, my Eagles, like who would I really want to use the product? But I definitely think, yeah, I'm gonna go with Chuck. I'm gonna go with Chuck.
I love it. Hey,
Yeah.
my parents and sister were in New York last year. They met Chuck at a hotel, so maybe it'll happen one day. Speak it
Yeah.
out into the universe.
Yeah, that would definitely be great. Charles, if you're listening, come on, I'll give you a tour of the product.
That's amazing, man. Well, hey, I appreciate your time. Thanks for the awesome advice, and pumped to link up here in person soon.